After a short 3-hour meeting over the Russian invasion of Ukraine and some of the briefest remarks we have seen from Donald Trump in some time, he and Russian President Vladimir Putin are now on their way back to their respective capitals without a peace deal or a ceasefire or any agreement or really much of anything to show for themselves. I mean, the third and perhaps most significant party to today's peace talks, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, was not even invited. But he wasn't silent. Just before Putin touched down in Anchorage, Zelensky posted this on social media, quote, "On the day of negotiations, the Russians are killing as well, and that speaks volumes. Recently, we've discussed with the U.S. and Europeans what can truly work. Everyone needs a just end to the war. Ukraine is ready to work as productively as possible to bring the war to an end, and we count on a strong position from America. Everything will depend on this, the Russian factors and American strength. Make no mistake, strength." Just as that Trump-Putin press conference was ending, air raid sirens began going off in the eastern Ukrainian city of Kharkiv, according to NBC News. Since Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, nearly 14,000 civilians have been killed, including more than 700 children. Every day this war continues, those numbers increase, and today was no different. Joining us now is retired U.S. Army Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. General Hertling, I have so many questions here. And one of the parties that is the most important party was not in attendance today, which is the Ukrainians. And what I would love to know from you is how you see kind of where things stand for Ukraine militarily. I mean, can they afford for the U.S. to walk away? The Europeans are clearly stepping up to some degree, but they don't, I don't think, have enough to step up and totally replace the United States. So help us understand what the repercussions are if the U.S. continues to withdraw from supporting them as they have over the last couple of years.
It's going to be tough, Jen. When you go down the list of things that the United States provides, not just the equipment and the ammunition, but also the intelligence, which is critical, which we've been providing since the start of the war, it's going to cause a shortfall on what the Ukrainians can do. Having said that, though, they have stepped up immensely over the last probably year and a half in terms of their capability in targeting, what they can hit, what they can range, and the kinds of assets they have in terms of primarily their drone warfare or their unmanned aerial systems and unmanned naval systems. They have done a miraculous job in terms of building a capability and also improving their ability to get more ammunition. But, you know, it's going to be tough. We provide quite a bit, not only to Ukraine, but to the Europeans as well. So you're seeing the Europeans offering some things for the Ukrainians, things that we have given them in the past or provided them through foreign military sales, and they are doing well. But it's a stalemate. It's been a stalemate for over about a year and a half on the Eastern Front in Donbass, and it's going to continue to be that way because Russia keeps pouring manpower in, but Russia is suffering incredible losses, and they just continue to go with their cannon meat, as they call it. We call it a meat grinder in terms of forcing forces that are untrained and incapable of dismantling the Ukrainian front. It's going to be tough, though. It's going to be very tough.
One of the things that struck me about Zelensky's message was he wanted people to hear from him this war is continuing. They are continuing to attack Ukraine today. We're hearing sirens in Ukraine today. You trained many of the commanders or Ukrainians who were fighting back in 2014. How do you think, to the degree you can speculate on it, like they would see a summit or a meeting like the one today? Do they just look the other way? Do they have any hope of what could come out of it? Or how would they view such a thing?
No, they certainly don't look the other way, Jen, and thanks for asking that question. I've got to admit, I'm biased toward the Ukraine. I've worked with them for several years. We established a training center from U.S. Army Europe in Heidelberg all the way up to Yavoriv, which is just north of Lviv in the western part, or excuse me, the eastern part of Ukraine. Trained a lot of non-commissioned officers at our training academy in Grafenwehr, Germany. But also, my partner in Ukraine was a guy named Colonel General Mikhail Vorovyov. He and I had a very intense relationship. He had served in the Soviet Army but he was a Ukrainian. When he came back to Ukraine, he wrote his doctoral thesis on how to transform the Ukrainian army to be more like a Western force. And we worked hand in glove in 2011 and 2012. He became my friend. Unfortunately, he died a few years ago from cancer, but I got to tell you, he transformed the army to be a Western force because he knew back in 2010, even before the first invasion of Ukraine in 2014, that Russia was going to try and usurp their territory. I've trained with many Russians, know many of their colonels that became generals, knew many of their sergeants that became senior sergeants and lieutenants. A lot of them have died on the battlefield. So for me, their fight is my fight. And seeing what happened today, I have a visceral response. I know how the Ukrainians are reacting to this. And I'd also say, my wife and I were in Europe for several weeks, a few weeks ago, and we saw in countries like Estonia and Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Germany, Sweden, and Finland, more Ukrainian flags than there were those country flags. They support this because they know what Russia is all about. And what I'd repeat 1,000 times is we seem to be disavowing Mr. Putin's actions, his thousands of war crimes, his violations of the Geneva Convention and the laws of land warfare, and suddenly we're buddies with them again and giving someone who is a pariah primarily on the world stage new credibility. And that just is really disheartening to me, and it's criminal from the standpoint of what the Ukrainians feel.
It's really powerful to hear how personally you feel as somebody who has spent time training them and with them. I also think it's one of my biggest takeaways today is that Putin was welcomed back out of isolation into the international community after a decade of being on the outside, which is perhaps the biggest damage from today. We'll learn more, I'm sure, over the coming days. Retired U.S. Army Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, thank you again so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.